Hey friends, welcome back to the Gentle and Lowly Co podcast. I'm Addie Ott, your host. Today, I am so glad to share this conversation with Courtney Jones. Courtney is the founder of Little Creative Company and a creative entrepreneur, speaker, author, and Bible teacher who is passionate about helping people live and create with purpose. Through her work, she encourages others to steward their gifts well, pursue meaningful work, and remain faithful to the calling God has placed on their lives. In this episode, Courtney and I talk about what it really means to live a purposeful life with Jesus. And friends, sometimes we can believe that living on mission means doing big, visible things for God. But more often, it's about cultivating a faithful heart and stewarding the opportunities He's placed right in front of us. I really hope today's conversation encourages you to remain faithful, attentive, and hopeful in whatever season God has you in. Now, here's my conversation with Courtney. Courtney, welcome to the Gentle and Lowly Co podcast. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, okay. So first thing, I always love to start the conversation with this question. Just tell us about what your current season of life looks like for you right now.
Yeah, so right now, I feel like we're in just a lot of waiting seasons in a lot of way. Right now, I've just been busy with running my business and then trying to get back into my writing, gearing up for the next season of my podcast for ministry, and then just living life with my husband in Columbus, Ohio. We have a lot of different things we're praying for this year and kind of waiting on from the Lord. And so it's just being patient in that and just trusting and trying to have open hands with what that looks like for God, and just knowing that He doesn't withhold any good thing and that He has good plans for us. And so it's just a lot of trust and waiting and that type of thing this season.
Yeah, all of those things, it sounds exciting. I mean, I feel like you and I wear a lot of similar hats, if you will, creatively, and there's always those dreams I feel like we're dreaming with God, but also there's other things, we're trusting for Him and waiting with Him. And so I feel like that's really going to be a theme in our conversation a little bit. And that's why I really wanted to have you for this conversation about living a purposeful life. And I feel like you're almost in the thick of it a little bit. And honestly, I feel like that's where God meets us. He meets us in that waiting, but also just the encouragement to be reminded of those testimonies of even in the midst of it, how is He faithful and how can we continuously showing up faithfully even in the life He's given us. So I love that, and I always love to just hear a little bit about what you're doing, what people are doing. And so we're going to dive in. Before our conversation, we're going to jump into music of the week. So, Courtney, what have you been listening to this week?
Yeah, there's been a couple songs that I circle back to that have been favorites for a while. I love the song called Authority in the Name of Jesus by House Fires. It's just such a sweet song about overcoming the lies that Satan tries to throw at us and just trusting in the authority in the name of Jesus. That's a favorite. And another one that I constantly come back to too, that I've listened to a lot recently, is Lean Back by Capital City Music. And it's just, I think just being in that kind of waiting type of season, it's just that sweet reminder to lean back in the arms of Jesus and that you can trust Him. And that's just a really sweet reminder in this season of life for sure. And then I always love a good Forrest Frank song.
Yeah, come on. Yes, I love Forrest Frank.
He's just my vibey, happy music for any time.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I love both of those songs. Lean Back, though, I can't tell you how many times that's one that I'm oh yeah, I need a good worship song to go to. And you're just recentering your heart and remember no, I can trust Him. He's been faithful before and I can surrender it too. But also House Fires, I'm I don't know, maybe it was 2015 or maybe 2017. I listened to them so much. It's I'm almost a diehard fan, but their music, it really feels almost that more intimate kind of worship night feel where if you don't have all your friends over right around you, you kind of feel you get that with them and listening to them, kind of Will Reagan a little bit, a little nostalgic there. But I love that so much. Oh my goodness. Those are really good. But just really getting back in that posture, I think those are really great recommendations. I love that.
Mhm.
Well, kind of on the Forrest Frank side a little bit. I'm like, because his a little more upbeat. But one of my friends, she recommended me to listen to Natalie Lane. And I was like, who is this girl? I love this so much though. I listened to one song of hers, Courtney. I think it was Grateful For. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm hooked. I'm like, say less. It's so much fun. Not that she's like the female version of Forrest Frank, but it's just like upbeat, really bright,
Yeah.
excited. And so Grateful For is definitely one of them. All Joy, where it's kind of just like counting it all joy. I think it's in reference to James, 1, and just kind of the inspiration behind that song. And I was like, wow, what a great anthem to be able to declare that. And it still sounds fun. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, how can we actually see maybe some of these trials we're going through, but see a different perspective and walk with Jesus in it? And then, if you grew up in church, I feel like you'd like this song, Church Kids. And I was like, okay, this just kind of takes me back to my childhood. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of fun. And I always love just finding new artists and new creatives. And I was like, okay, she's probably going to be on my rotation for like the next couple of months, especially into the summer, kind of springish time too.
Yeah, I'll have to look her up. I've not heard of her, but I'm
Yeah.
always loving like new artists, new music, or like new to me at least. Sometimes there'll be like artists that people say, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they've been around forever," and I'm
Yeah.
like,
What?
new to me, but I love it now. Like.
I know. That's how I feel. It's like, oh wait, she seems like she's been doing this for a long time. So I feel like I live under a rock sometimes. But I'm like, we always need new music, and so hopefully that encourages our friends
Yeah.
just to find some new music in whatever season they're in. And then for theme of the week, this was so much fun this week. We're getting back into kind of these rhythms with the podcast coming back in the springtime for us here at Gentle and Lowly Co. And it's been so much fun because then with springtime and with the new year, there's more markets for me personally. And I'm from the Indianapolis area. A lot of our friends who listen to the podcast know that. But it was so much fun to be able to do a market kind of in my hometown this past weekend. And, doing events, you've probably done so many, with your business, and they can add up in a lot of ways where, over 20 or 30 markets, and there's ones that stand out. And for me personally, this market was so much fun just because I felt like every time I like turned around, I got to like see someone else I knew and give them a hug. And it was just like the best physical and tangible example of community, and just when you're supported like by your community in the season of life where you're doing the things that you're called to and your friends are showing up, but then you can show up for them in a different way. I didn't realize how meaningful that was until I was packing up and I was leaving. I was like, the market's already over. Like, I was kind of sad, but then I got to go hang out with them downtown and hang out and be with them and eat dinner and stuff like that. For me, just that encouragement, even for our friends listening, is that whatever season you're in, and even if community can feel hard at times, God will bring the right people back into your life or bring a new group of community. I mean, a lot of these friends are personally newer for me, a couple years, and I feel like they're an answer to prayer to me. And so to see that tangible expression of just being loved by God, but also just this community that God calls us to, was just such a gift. And so I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to forget that. So I know it's a little bit of a bigger one for me just at a market, but what kind of has God been sharing with you this past week, Courtney?
Yeah. I feel like it plays into the overall theme that I talked about earlier, but he keeps bringing me back to the verse. I think it's in Galatians, but about like not growing weary and doing good. Because when you are in like a prolonged waiting season for different things, no matter what it is, especially things around calling and like job stuff and just like dreams that you have in that sphere, sometimes like you feel like you're doing all the things that you can be doing to like progress in that thing and be obedient, and you don't feel like you're seeing necessarily the like fruit of it yet or the outcome yet. And so sometimes you do grow weary when you're like, man, I've been just like putting my back into this. I'm doing everything I know to do. Like, how come I haven't seen like this dream or this thing come to fruition yet? And so you sometimes grow weary in like the waiting or the disappointing parts of those seasons. And that verse and that theme has been continually coming up for me recently of like, don't grow weary and doing good, like keep going, like, all of those kinds of theme verses that go with that. And so I feel like that has been a big theme for me over the past week. I just got done with like a big launch for like my business. And then I'm also trying to be more active with like my ministry calling and all of that, and kind of relaunching some things with that. And sometimes things go how you want, sometimes they don't go how you want, and sometimes you're like, Lord, like if it didn't go how I wanted, like does it mean I'm not supposed to do this or what? But sometimes it's just like God knows exactly what you need and can handle in that season, and sometimes you need it to be smaller than what you hoped it would be so that you can handle it. And so it's just that like not growing weary and doing good theme has just been continual, and just a sweet reminder that God truly does care and he holds us, and kind of aligned with the songs that I mentioned too. It's like God's just like kind of like encapsulating this whole little like season. It's just like, okay, like keep leaning into me, keep trusting me, like I do care for you. Because sometimes I think it's easy in those harder seasons of waiting where it can feel like God is like distant, or you're just like, where are you, God? Like how come you're not answering me? Like, hello.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, he's there, he cares, and like he cares more than we care about the things that we are praying for.
Mm-hmm. Man, I honestly love though that you mentioned Galatians, that verse, not growing weary, because I have a sweatshirt that like has that on it. I didn't design it, but I was like, I love this so much, and it's one of my sweatshirts I go back to, and like kind of after a long day, doing the things we're stewarding, we're serving where we're called, and you can just kind of sometimes feel discouraged, but it's like, okay, even if I'm tired, I'm like, we're not going to give up. We're not going to grow weary. We're going to rest. But also just that reminder that he is actually the one holding us. Like he holds it all together. And you're right, Courtney, like sometimes there isn't always, maybe this quote unquote success or the outcome we wanted, or, it is really quiet and you're like, okay, yeah, where's the friend on the other line of the phone? Where are they? But I am just so reminded by those like gentle nudges and things where he's like, wait a minute, no, like I see you. And you're like, did anyone else notice that? He's like, no, that was for you, for you to hold on to me and to remember my faithfulness. So man,
Yeah, so good.
I love that so much. That's so encouraging. And honestly, like that really like perfectly kind of translates or kind of transitions us into our main topic about living a purposeful life. And I've really been thinking about this just realistically of like how living a purposeful life with Jesus, even though you and I both, we're doing public things, we feel that call on our heart to share the gospel in these unique expressions. But at the same time, I'm so reminded as I look to Jesus' life, like he also was intimate in his everyday life with the people around him. It wasn't always these big moments, and it was in these hidden moments of faithfulness in the everyday. And so starting there, like, how can we as believers just begin to view our daily lives, our work, our relationships, our families, our friendships, our responsibilities as places where we're living on mission with Jesus?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've always heard it said too, is like our first ministry is to our families, whether we're married, whether we're not married, whatever that looks like, our like immediate circle of like the people we do life with, like our first ministry is there, because if we don't take care of those who take care of us, then, what good is it helping those that are strangers, And I think Jesus did that so well in taking care of those in his inner circle, with his disciples and his mom and his siblings and everybody like that. And I think that just sets the example for us of just how he would withdraw and go and spend time with the Lord. And he always had like the like first things first, right? And so it's like he knew he needed to spend time with the Father, even though he is part of the Trinity. It's like he still knew, like, yes, I am fully God, but I also need to spend time with God, And it's like he would withdraw and go to these places to get quiet with the Lord and to care for his family and stuff. And I just think that reminds us that if we aren't giving our best to those closest to us, then it's almost not that we're living this like false public life, but it's like if we're only giving our best to complete strangers and then we're like neglecting the like personal relationships in our life, it's going to end up crumbling and our foundation is going to crumble behind the scenes. And so I think that we have to be intentional to make sure that those closest to us get our best so that we can then give our best to those that we are called to minister to.
That's such a good reminder. I mean, in whatever season, like you said, I really appreciated that. You're like, yeah, whoever your family is right now in the season, we're both on that younger side. And, for my friends who are in their younger 20s, they're in totally different seasons than me in my later 20s and then in their later 30s. And I feel like I had to learn so much from my friends who are a little bit above me and vice versa. But even if you are married or single, like whatever that looks like, wherever God's placed you to be on mission. And I feel like I've been really reminded of just how I spent my season at college, just being intentional and being discipled by other people, but also pouring into other people there too. Like you're exactly right, where we're showing up with excellence in the things we're called to in our work, those even co-working relationships, but also like our families and offline. That's such a good reminder because it's not like this dual life, but we want to be the most authentic version of ourselves everywhere we go. And that's exactly what Jesus did.
Yeah.
And that's a great example. And just a great reminder of like, Jesus had to get away. We need to get away too. Like that rest is so important. So, man, that's so good. And I mean, kind of, I guess a little bit transitioning into more of like the creative or just kind of like our work, whatever work we do. I mean, I know you personally with little creative company, and your personal platform, kind of relaunching some things over there, you're really intentional to reflect this creativity and intentionality in everything you do. And I totally understand that. I feel like that's a big missional thing that I love. And so just how have you learned to steward those gifts and opportunities that God has entrusted you in this current season?
Yeah. I feel like it's seeing the common thread between it all. I've actually been rereading Garden City by John Mark Comer.
Yes.
And he talks about how there really shouldn't be this sacred and secular divide when it comes to our work, when it comes to our lives, because even back in when like the Bible was written and when like in the Hebrew culture, like there never really was this like divide between like, oh, this is a secular thing and this is a sacred thing. Like all of it was sacred. All of it was spiritual because God calls us to be a light for him wherever we go. And so when I used to be in the corporate world, that didn't necessarily look like me constantly like ministering every day to my coworkers, but it did look like people knew that I was a believer. And if their kid was in the hospital or they had a hard situation, people would stop by my desk and be like, hey, I know you're a Christian. Like, I know you pray. Could you, pray for this? And so even now that I am no longer in the corporate world, now I run my own business and I also do ministry through my personal platform that I have, I still see that thread, even though what I do overall is more ministry focused. There's still that thread of being able to minister to people, whatever that looks like, wherever I'm called in this season. And for this season of life, it looks like ministering to people who are also called, like whether they run a business, whether they have a platform, whether they are speaking or writing. I serve them kind of on two sides. I have a little creative company where I'm serving them through websites and branding and marketing tactics and SEO and helping them be able to grow their platform and reach more people for the Lord, even if their business isn't necessarily outright Christian, so to speak. Like maybe they are faith-based and so they share the gospel through whatever avenue that is. And then I have my personal platform where I have a podcast and I write books and speak and write blogs and stuff like that. And it's also ministering to people who are called. And so I think it's just seeing those common threads and realizing there's not necessarily a separation necessarily. It's like, oh, well, you work at a hospital, so like you're not, sharing the gospel as much as this person, but it's seeing like, okay, God, how do you want to use me right where I am? And like, he is the creator. And so he gives us that creativity. And so I feel like seeking him for those like creative things and for that creativity is how we continue just to like shine our light for him through all the different things he calls us to, even if it looks different in different seasons.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so beautifully said of like, just like, I mean, one, I love John Mark Comer. And so, yes, all of those things. I feel like I've learned so much from him and just living a kind of an intentional life in that way, but where it's like this divide. I love that you mentioned that, like, what didn't used to be so separate. And sometimes, we want that work-life balance. It's important to rest and all those things, but at the same time, the things that we're called to or we're doing, it should light us up. Like God created us or wired us this way for a reason. Like there's a reason I'm not like a veterinarian or a doctor or something. Like I can't handle, some of the things. And I'm so grateful for like my friends and even my family members or people I know who can then work on cars and stuff. But you think about like, I always personally think about just like service can be modeled in anything. I mean, you think about hospitality, that's why like there's these notes of hospitality. When people have a good experience, they're like, yeah, wow, they're really set apart. And hopefully as believers, the way that we work with excellence, the way that we serve people, then there is something that's different. It'd be like, wait a minute, like what actually, like, how do you do this, or why are you doing that? And I think that's, you probably have had that question asked, like, why did you start this? Like, what was that burden on your heart? And that like is able to bring this great conversation hopefully towards the gospel. But I can think back to different seasons where I wasn't doing XYZ, or wasn't maybe this actual career. It might have just been a job, one of my first jobs or something. And I'm like, well, yeah, I was just a cashier, but I was still like talking to people, asking them, taking interest in them, and seeing people exactly where I was in front, like where they were in front of me. And I think that's the encouragement of what you're saying, like whatever we're called to, like just to see people, and kind of like going into our next question of just like being available to God realistically. And so even though like our seasons can change, we can move on from, okay, maybe from college, then to post-grad, into our careers, wherever that is, like our seasons can change, we can move, drastically as well. But what does that look like for you, just to stay open and available for God to use you? Like kind of thinking through like the rhythms, prayers, or practices that just help you remain attentive to where God's calling you.
Yeah. That's something that I have had to do a lot in my life because I've moved a lot. I have changed careers. I have held on to things loosely. And as someone who, knowing me, is like, I am more type A. I am more like, I like to be in control of things. And so that's something God has had to loosen my grip on a ton. But it's also funny because I feel like at the same time, like whether I wanted to or not, I've had to hold things very loosely in my life. And I think that's such a good posture to be in. It's just very open-handed of like praying for the things that you desire and that you want in life, but also holding it open-handed to say, God, like this is what I am praying for, but I also am praying for your will in it. And I know that you know what's best, and I will be obedient and have faith for the things that you call me to step out into. But at the same time, like, I know your timing is perfect. And I've had to do that through so many seasons. I walked through a season of 7 years of singleness before I met my husband. And I had to hold that loosely because I can't tell you how many times I cried waiting in that season of like, Lord, like, I'm doing all the right things. Like, why can't I find my husband? Little did I know he was halfway around the world on a mission trip. Yeah, and so wasn't even in the same hemisphere as me when I was praying these things. But it's like I just kept holding that loosely of like in times where I thought like, well, maybe this is the right guy. And it's like, nope, that's not who God has. And like the rejection and stuff like that. Or in my career, there's been times where I was in the corporate world for 10 years and there was so many times I wanted to leave jobs. I applied to other jobs. I tried to leave to go like work at a ministry, or tried to leave for any number of reasons, and God just wouldn't let me yet. It just like wasn't time. But then looking back, I kept seeing over and over again why he had me where he had me, and even just like moving different places. Like I am originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I moved to Alabama in middle school and went to high school there and college at University of Alabama. Then I stayed in Birmingham for 5 years after college. And then at like kind of towards the end of that 5 years, I just kept feeling this stirring that God had something else on the horizon as far as where I was going to live. And I had never thought about moving back to Cincinnati. It was not on my radar. And I was like, I looked for other jobs in Cincinnati when I finally kind of felt called to go back there, because I felt called to be part of this church plant that was through the church I was at in Birmingham, Church of the Highlands. They help a lot of church planters. And there was a pastor and his wife who were like, yeah, we're here to learn and we're going to plant a church in Cincinnati. And I was like, what? Like, I've been praying for this for so long because I know that Cincinnati needs this. And so I was like, Lord, like, am I supposed to be a part of this? Like, what is this? I wrestled with it for a year. And because it just didn't make sense for me. I'm like, I'm in the corporate world, right? Like, I'm like, I can't just quit my very high paying job and just go this Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, yeah.
And so, but again, like I learned to hold it loosely and just keep open hands with the Lord. And so I just really prayed about it. I fasted about it, and God opened the doors for me to work remotely with my corporate job to move to Cincinnati. And I was able to help them with their graphic design for my like time living in Cincinnati and do ministry that way and so many different things. But it was one of those things where it's like, we just have to trust that God has the best for us. And even like meeting my husband, we ended up being friends for a year before we started dating. And that was hard because I really liked him and he just wasn't quite ready for a relationship. But I was just like, Lord, like, I feel like this is my person, but like, I don't understand why it's not happening quickly. And it's like, and everything just fell together in his timing. And even now, the things that we are praying for and waiting on in this season, as hard as it is sometimes, because I've walked through so much disappointment with waiting on different things too, where I was praying for something and it felt like the rug got pulled out from under me, or something just didn't happen how I wanted to last minute. But every single time looking back, I got to see how God came through and he was faithful and he knew what was best for me. And I was like, nope, that job just wasn't the right job for you. That's not where you needed to be. And as much as in the moment I wanted it and felt like it should have been for me, like God knew. And so it's just learning to walk open-handedly with him, I think, is how I've been able to like approach that and just be like, okay, Lord, like open hands. And I heard this on a podcast years ago, but it was something along the lines of like, we put our plans in sand, but our like dreams in concrete or something, where it's like, we know the things God's called us to, and like that may be in concrete, but the way that it comes about is in sand so that God can change it. It's not like, sometimes even though like I know I'm called to write and speak, that has looked different in different seasons of life. And even with my business, it started as a side hustle and now it's full time, but it's looked different in different seasons. I think the more loosely we can hold things while having faith, it just helps us to have that full trust in God.
Yeah, man, I feel like there's so many things there. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I love that so much. I'm like, that analogy, I honestly don't think I've ever heard that. And so I love that because, I mean, it makes me think of just the reference, like building our house on that firm foundation, and like not with sand, but in this case, like we don't want to build our plans so concretely, lay that foundation where it's so rigid, where we're in that kind of control over everything. We're like, wait a minute, are we actually letting God like take the reins? That's another reference to a song. But you like, oh my gosh, so many things. But realistically, like, just like, what does it look like practically? And I just love that you're just being open about like, moving a lot of different places, but holding it loosely. And even just sometimes like that tension we can feel in different seasons where we're in this job. I mean, my friends probably have lost count about how many jobs I've had, only a couple, I guess several years out of college now. But it was just like, okay, like this is what's next, Lord, this is what's next. But there's also some times when we're like, wait, I know I'm supposed to do this thing, but I'm still here. And being patient, like waiting and trusting on him. And I love that you're like, okay, I think I'm supposed to go over here to Cincinnati, but like, okay, Lord, like, how's it going to work logistically? Like you said, you can't just up and quit. Yeah. And so it's like, well, I would just go there, but I can't. And so how do you actually hold that loosely, stay fast about it, bring wise counsel into all those things? But even with moving, just not being, I don't know, holding on to the life you have, even if it's a great life, you're like, oh, I don't want to leave. How can you still hold it loosely in that way where you're available to actually like be picked up and just plopped somewhere else? And it might be like the next best thing that God has, because he always knows, like you said, he always knows what's best. His way is better. The fact that they made a way for you to work remotely, that's huge. Like that's incredible. So many things that happen for you to get to XYZ, to get that place. And so that's encouraging. And even just, waiting seasons, sometimes we're like, okay, is this ever going to be quote unquote over?
Well, and I feel like too, when we hold things too tightly, we don't give God room to move in our lives. If it's all up to us and we're just like, okay, God, you gave me the blueprint, I'll be on my way now. Like, see you on the other side.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't require faith. It doesn't give him room to guide and lead us, and it says in scripture, it talks about how he lights like each step. It's like he doesn't illuminate the whole path. It's like he shows us each step to take. And so I feel like it almost strengthens our faith to rely on him for each step and to guide us in that. Because again, like if we knew every single step he wanted us to take, then like it wouldn't require any faith on our part and wouldn't require us to stay close to him. But instead, it's kind of like we're like walking, like holding his hand of like, okay, Lord, like, is this where you want me? And if we are gripping so tightly that we're just like, no, it has to be this way, like we might totally miss what God has for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, like that's such a practical reminder, but it's just that reality of like, yeah, we might have this ideal thing that we feel called or led to do, but the direction or the pathway that we think is the quote unquote right way might actually not be the way that God wants to take us there.
Mm-hmm.
I know you and I both were like, oh, this is what we're going to do. And it's like, no, it's totally different, right? But you wouldn't hopefully change it because you've seen God work. And that really like brings us into just this quieter kind of faithfulness of living a life of faithfulness. And so like kind of that faithfulness and the obedience that goes unseen, like what have you learned about that in those daily moments now, even in the season where you might have more availability, where like, oh yeah, I can just go, maybe run this errand or get this done. Like, how have you allowed that to open yourself up to new obedience and new availability in this season?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because it can be hard sometimes, especially when you're called to like a public platform. Sometimes it can be hard to have those seasons of feeling hidden or feeling like everything's happening beneath the ground. But what I've also learned too is it just allows us to grow those stronger roots. And not everything has to be public, even if we're called to public ministry or public whatever, doesn't mean that everything we do has to be public, but it allows me at least to be able to just minister again, like to the people closest to me. Like being in this season that I'm currently in, I have more flexibility to help friends who do have kids right now because, I work for myself. We don't have kids yet. And so it's like I've been able to go like babysit in the daytime for some of our friends who like they needed a break or they had to go to work or whatever, and like daycare was closed or whatever the reason is. So it's like I'm able to go love on their kids and watch their kids for a few hours, even though like I'm not able to get work done during that time or whatever, but like I'm able to like make that sacrifice and be like, hey, like I'll step in and help. Or it looks like being able to be there for family. Like we've had, unfortunately, a lot of kind of tragedy in our family the past year with losing my husband's grandmother and then his sister unexpectedly in the fall. And because of the flexibility that I have in this season with working for myself, I was able to drop everything and be there for him and his family and be able to like drive. We live in Columbus right now. So Cincinnati's a 2-hour drive south for us. And so it's like I was able to drop everything and contact my clients and be like, hey. And I feel like being in this season, it's like, even though it's not exactly all the things we want it to be in the sense of like where we want to be and things that we're hoping for and praying for in the future, it's also like been so evident that God has us here for a purpose for however long it is, to be able to love on those people that, yes, I can go on the internet and encourage people all day long and like post things and write books and all of that. But like we talked about earlier, like I'm able to love on the people really well in this season where I'm at because of the flexibility I have and because I'm not traveling as much for speaking engagements or going to all these different events. I'm able to be even more present with those who I do have in my life right now.
Yeah, man. I think one of kind of like a bigger lesson for me this past year, I guess last year, of just like the gift of being present and like truly with how many screens, we're using screens to record this, all the things, but just that time and just being kind of a little bit more reflective, though, the time with our loved ones, like we don't get that back, but also the time with our friends, like the people who are directly in front of us. And so, yeah, some of these bigger things, they might be, I guess, quote unquote, cool, and they are exciting and we might be called to them, right? But also like, I think what a gift to have that kind of flexibility or autonomy to be able to like, actually, this is how I can care. And this is like the greatest ministry I need to do right now, to be with my family. And I'm like, I've just never taken that for granted right now in the season where I'm like, yeah, I can just go and, spend time with my family in Indy, 2 hours away, like, you get that. And that truly is a huge blessing. Like, literally just serving and being where is needed. And like, I feel like that's what Jesus did. He was washing the disciples' feet. He was doing the things
Yeah.
that no one, quote unquote, wanted to do, but at the same time, he was attentive to people's needs and relieving their burdens. And he does that for us too. And so, man,
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by that. And
And
again,
he
just,
always had margin too. Like he
yeah,
constantly
absolutely.
created margin in his life. Like nothing, he was never too busy to
Mhm.
like be there for people. Just like him like pausing when the woman who had been bleeding for like 12 years like touched the hem of his cloak. It was like he stopped everything in that moment to be with her. And he was not easily like upset if he was interrupted. Like he was so gracious when he was
Mhm.
interrupted and he allowed himself to be interrupted. And I think that's what we have to do too sometimes is make sure that there's margin in our life and in our season, even no matter how busy it is. Like we need to like work in margin and allow ourselves to be interruptible because like sometimes that's like when God uses us the most is in those moments. Like I know before there's been times where something felt like an inconvenience where I'm like, oh man, like why is my car not working or something, why is this happening? And then it's like in those moments that I was able to actually like be a light to somebody or minister to somebody that I maybe wouldn't have if I had just been like, no, I'm going to figure this out and just bulldoze through it and, not let this ruin my day or whatever. So I think that's like also a good reminder that for us to be able to be interruptible and be able to have margin to love on the people in our lives, whether it's someone close and personal or like a stranger at Target,
Yeah.
we have to like keep our eyes open to be like, okay, Lord, like Holy Spirit, like what do you want me to do in this moment in this season and see like where he guides us.
Yeah, man, I feel like that's such like a practical thing that we all can do because I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to Target, got my list, go to
Yeah.
Hobby Lobby. You're like, okay, gonna take 10 minutes or 30 minutes. Like, oh wait, no, an hour later. But it's like, wait a minute, no, that's exactly what Jesus did, and he
Hmm.
wasn't like, oh no, go away, like I'm too busy. No, it's the
Yeah.
exact opposite, and I think we want to do the things well, we want to steward it well, but also what is our attitude, what is our heart posture like say about how we're doing those things, and are we approachable? I think having that
Yeah.
gentle heart, I think that's such a good reminder. And so I feel like kind of on the flip side, for our friends who are listening where they might be in that waiting season or they're desiring to live just a life on mission, they want to live this purposeful life. Like, what encouragement, Courtney, would you give to those friends listening, like where to start? And just if they're even questioning, like, is what I'm doing, does it even matter like today?
Yeah, I just want to say first, like, if you're feeling that, like, I feel you, I see you, and I have been there, and I'm still there sometimes. I feel that so often with social media where it feels like the algorithm's so fleeting. And I'm like, I post something encouraging and it's just like crickets. And you're like, man, Lord, I really thought you like wanted me to post that. But at the same time, with different waiting seasons, I think it's kind of just the overall theme of what we've talked about today is one, not growing weary in the things that God's called you to do. Two, to keep running the race that God's called you to run. And three, to look around in your current season and see where does God want to use you in the waiting. Because I know for me, I've had so many different types of waiting seasons, whether it was in my season of singleness waiting for a husband or in a job waiting for a different job or, in the season that we're in right now with the big things that we are praying for that's like kind of covering all three, like all different areas of like things that my husband and I are praying through that we're waiting on things for his career, for my career, just for like where God wants us to be, how he wants to use us, and all of those things. It's easy to look at what we don't have and be like, man, Lord, like, why? But sometimes if we look at it and be like, okay, Lord, there's a reason that this hasn't happened yet. What do you want me to do right now, right here? Like, who am I missing? Am I not looking at? Am I overlooking in this season that you have me in? And sometimes waiting seasons are for us to give us reprieve. Sometimes like we just need that season to heal from something or to be encouraged or to grow roots to be strengthened for the next season. And sometimes those waiting seasons are purely a timing thing with my husband, it was purely a timing thing where, God had us in two different seasons at the same time. And he was one, like kind of coming back to Jesus. And then he went on this 11-month mission trip called the World Race. And so for like a year, he was not even in this country. And then, we just hadn't crossed paths until I moved back to Cincinnati, and he had just moved away from Cincinnati. But then COVID happened, and we met through a small group on Zoom through the church that I moved to Cincinnati for. And it just all kind of made sense. And even that year of us being friends, where it felt like, Lord, like, I know we're supposed to be together. Why can't we just date now? Like, God was healing things in my husband and in me that needed to come to the surface before we started dating. And there were things even beyond the two of us where it's like God still had work for me to do in Cincinnati for that year before I ended up moving away from Cincinnati to live closer to my boyfriend at the time, now husband. And so we just never know why God has us in a waiting season. But I think if we can have that open posture, like we talked about, and say, Lord, like, what do you have for me in this season? Because even right now, like living in Columbus, like we've had a hard time finding friends. And so like it's been kind of lonely in a lot of ways because I'm like, Lord, like, why? Like I had all these great friends in Birmingham and Cincinnati, and I'd have girls' nights all the time and all this stuff. And this season has felt very difficult with that. And like my husband and I have each other, but we both crave community. But we've been able to find other ways to have community online or just different things. Like I've been able to focus more on growing my business in this season and just really spending time with the Lord that maybe I wouldn't have had otherwise if I was just filling it constantly with friends. And so I think if we can shift our mindset in waiting seasons and just be like, Lord, what do you want me to see? What do you want me to do in this season? Instead of like sitting there with our arms crossed, like, why is it taking so long?
Yep.
Like, and being upset about it. It's more of, continuing to see the goodness of God, even where he has us, because it's not for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that's so beautifully said. And yeah, I mean, even just like that mental picture, like sitting, like crossing your arms, like the posture, I mean, just the body language of like, yeah, like, are we even like available for God to work in our heart?
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, okay, maybe you need to get into a different posture. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm like, I go out and walk with my dog out in the woods and I'm like, oh yeah, by 15 minutes, I feel a little bit better, just like talking things out and praying to God. But just even like, how can you reframe the current season you're in instead of it, like seeing it as this negative thing, like actually ask God, okay, what do you want to grow in me? Or what do you want maybe to prune? I know that's hard to even think about
Yeah.
sometimes, but I mean, I know I've been better for it too. I mean, and seeing like time in the morning as a gift. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's only me and my dog. I get to do whatever I want, right? And it's like, how can you use like your current season as a strength wherever you are and wherever
Mm-hmm.
God's calling you to? Man,
Yeah.
Courtney, I feel like we can talk probably so much longer, but like, I love everything you've said, but just like for our final thoughts, just really practically, we always ask this question on the podcast. How are you actively carrying the gentle love of Jesus wherever you go?
I feel like it is just kind of that surrender of carrying it, of just like, okay, Lord, like I'm carrying your love by just being surrendered to you, and just that sovereignty, right? I feel like sometimes something that I not necessarily burdened by, but kind of burdened by is I feel like we have a culture of Christians who Jesus is their savior, but is he their Lord? And I think it's like keeping that lordship at the forefront of our mind of like, Jesus, you are Lord of my life, and I'm carrying your love by just being in surrender to you and being able to like gently be that light and softness to other people who are hurting in like a really dark world, and being able to like be soft towards them and not be harsh in a harsh world.
Yeah, man, I feel like it sounds so simple, but in our world today, that is kind of a brave thing to do, of like actually believing the best in people and smiling at people like at the gas station or saying
Mm-hmm.
hi. Sometimes you think that it might not do anything, but like, no, I've noticed like it's not just kindness. Kindness is a fruit of the spirit, but also it is that gentle love of Jesus. And like
Yeah.
we get to be that salt and light into the world. And so I love that so much. I love it. And it's a good challenge for all of us. So, Courtney, just again, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been just such a gift to learn from you and just hear what God's doing in your life. And for friends listening, just where can they find you and keep learning from you?
Yeah, I would love to hang out with you on Instagram. I am on there at Court Hope Jones. You can find me there. You can go to my website, CourtneyHopeJones.com. And I am relaunching season 5 of my podcast, The Trailblazer Talks, is coming out. You can find that on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. That'll be coming out soon. It's a Christian leadership and personal development podcast, so we'd love to have you listen. But I always love connecting, and I love to have conversations in the DMs.
Well, everyone go be Courtney's friend, hang out with her on Instagram. And of course, friends, thank you just so much for listening, and have a wonderful week, and continue to carry the gentle love of Jesus wherever you go.